This is what remains of a once vibrant ecosystem. The Amazon rainforest redistributes a significant amount of oxygen back into the atmosphere. But this year, a cancer spread on the planet's lungs. Nearly 10,000 kilometers of the Amazon was burned.
Our first reaction was to cross the information with data on deforested areas. And voila, there is a very strong relation between deforestation and the focus points of heat this year.
Deforestation in Brazil has surged to its highest level in more than a decade. Government data show the pace the forest has been cut down in 2019 rose by 15% over the previous year. Loggers cleared an area the size of a football pitch every minute. Experts say some of the degradation is irreversible.
A catastrophe. When there was no fire, all this was living nature, the animals, the flora and fauna. Now seeing everything being destroyed makes me really sad.
Fires were also started to clear land for farming and cattle ranching. Some of it has been unregulated and increased the rate of accidental spreads.
Big wildfires are a disaster for the climate. They are releasing thousands and millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, but also on the short term, they are putting big amounts of black carbon, smoke into the atmosphere. A big health hazard for people living in the vicinity, but also a strong driver of climate change.
Environmentalists say the increase in fires coincides with the election of Jair Bolsonaro as president in 2018. He promised to use the Amazon to fuel Brazil's economy, but he's compromised environmental laws in the process.
In 2008, we created the Amazon Fund, 80,000 sustainable jobs and money for programs to combat fires. Bolsonaro dismantled all that in a short period of time. His government is the exterminator of a sustainable future. He's a pyromaniac.
In response to international uproar, the president deployed the army to contain the blazes, and G7 countries offered to assist. But Bolsonaro rejected aid after French President Emmanuel Macron accused him of not doing enough to honor climate commitments.
Certain countries, instead of helping, have behaved in a disrespectful manner and with a colonialist spirit. They have even questioned what we hold as a most sacred value, our sovereignty.
4 months, Brazilian authorities battled thousands of fires before they were finally put out. The devastation was stark. The environment ministers said a new strategy was needed to stop illegal logging and mining. But President Bolsonaro has doubled down on his nationalistic view of the Amazon. He's described the rainforest as a resource to be exploited. That means the coming year may see more deforestation, mining, agribusiness, and more fires. Regan Levine, TRT World.
And for more, our senior business producer, Mobin Nasser, joins me now in the studio. Hi, Mobin. Now, as we heard there, Jair Bolsonaro's government has been accused of enabling or even encouraging the deforestation of the Amazon. Why is that?
Deforestation has been on the rise since 2012, but we know it's worsened under Bolsonaro. And there seems to be a concerted institutional effort. Now, why do I say that? You've seen lots of complaints about people convicted of deforestation in protected areas being given pardons. There are complaints by indigenous tribes about people attacking their areas and not being arrested or brought to task by law enforcement agencies. The government as a whole, as you know, has been denying climate change altogether. And then as was mentioned in the report, the president continues to mention how this is a resource that has to be exploited and only Brazil will decide what it does with it. But it goes beyond that. They've also dismantled IBAMA, the Environmental Protection Agency of the country. That reduces oversight. They're also taking away permits from protected areas and they're giving approvals to the use of dangerous agrochemicals to be used by especially the farmers who are using these clearings. So really a whole lot of steps that are pushing back years of efforts in this area.
Yes, we hear about the role that businesses are playing in the destruction of the Amazon, businesses like farmers, as you say, as well as ranchers. Why is it so lucrative for them to delve deeper into the Amazon?
I think what we can see is some sort of a reverse relationship, an inverse relationship between how well people are doing in the urban areas and the rate of deforestation. So on the one hand, you have a lack of jobs and poverty in urban areas. That's pushing people deeper into the forest. On the other hand, we've seen Brazil become the biggest exporter of beef in the world. That in turn has driven demand for soybean, which is used as cattle feed. And so now you have a cycle where cattle ranchers are going into areas, using them as pasture land, thereafter selling that land to farmers and then moving deeper into the forest. So this is sort of, in a way, a cycle that's developed, and it's really making the situation worse every year.
We know part of the reason why Jair Bolsonaro was elected was to boost economic growth in Brazil. The economy has been stagnating, or at least flagging, as we've been covering over the past year. How do you believe can Jair Bolsonaro balance the economic imperatives with the imperatives of conserving the Amazon?
Look, it seems like a lot of what the government needs to do is not new. It's stuff that's been done by previous administrations. If you look at Lula da Silva's government, his environment minister, Marina Silva, is largely credited with bringing down the rate of deforestation. So what did they do? Well, on the one hand, they increased, they gave legal cover to people who were already living in these areas, then subjected them to taxes and environmental laws. They also increased the area under protection from about 25% of the forest that is inside Brazil to almost about 50% of the forest under various heads, either belonging to indigenous tribes or to industries that are working in sustainable industries, which brings me to the next point, that the government has to take not just rules to preserve the forest, but also to provide people with other sustainable forms of employment and revenue generation that are not present. So things like rubber tapping or even other industries that can be set up in the urban areas. We saw poverty alleviation programs being introduced by Lula da Silva's government. Again, not all of those things worked. Some of those things, like giving deeds to people who've been in these areas and they could prove that they'd been working in these areas for a few years, encouraged others to move in, hoping that a similar amnesty would be forthcoming a few years down the line. But really, all of that would happen, what must happen before any of those measures can take place, is the government needs to change its stance on deforestation and really wake up and recognize how important it is, not just for Brazil, but for the world.
Okay, Mobin, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you for breaking down that issue for us and for taking us through all the other stories this year. Looking forward to what we have to cover in the new year. Thank you.